to Cyber Conversations, the show where it's okay to agree to disagree. Today we are talking about the 2011 movie Thor. This is the first Thor in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It stars Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, et al. I actually really enjoyed this. This is one of my favorite movies from the Phase 1 part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Today it's me and Bob. We also are joined by Heather and Bob's son Matthew.
Thor, I think that the first thing we kind of need to talk about is, so if we recap, right, we had Iron Man, we had Incredible Hulk, we had Iron Man 2, right? All based in, I don't want to say reality, but all based on Earth. And this was the first movie where we got to see, in essence, another world, another side to the MCU. This kind of opened it up.
This was the introduction. I think they even said this when the movie was getting ready to come out. This is introducing the cosmic side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because Marvel, even the comics, always had three specific levels to it. There was the earthly realm, the cosmic realm, and then the magical realm, which will get introduced to the cinematic universe for a few more movies.
Correct. Yeah. And but I think that, I mean, the MCU, we've got, when you look at Thor and you got rainbow bridges, you got Shakespearean space gods, Kenneth Branagh directing, which I think was a big part of it. So I wanted to ask the three of you, and we'll start with Heather. When you saw it, I mean, you saw the trailers, but you see Thor. How did you, just kind of a quick, what did you feel about it? What you saw versus when you saw the movie versus what you saw in the trailers and that type of thing? Just what did you think?
For me, without having the comic, being familiar, for me, not being familiar with the comics, I did not know about these different realms. And what was different for me was all the other prior movies were Earth and humans, and this just went into fantasy world. So when I see it, it was, this fantasy realm of Asgard, and a little more over the top than the other movies so far.
Right. Matthew?
In the same realm as Heather,
no pun intended on that.
No, that was unintentional. No, I don't remember seeing a trailer for this one. And I remember after Iron Man 2, I was more excited for Captain America. So when we saw this one, it was more of a surprising gift, I guess is what I'd call it. I do like this movie a lot. I didn't know much about Norse mythology, but it was very fantastical in the way it was presented in this movie. And I really liked it, especially seeing now that I'm older, I know more about Norse mythology and the different mediums of entertainment have taken it in different places. I definitely prefer this version of like Asgard and the Bifrost, and even this version of Thor and Loki, despite the inaccuracies to the characters. Overall, it's more for comic book rather than Norse, but I liked it. I enjoyed this movie a lot.
I think that you put it well when you said that it was a gift. This is a movie that, like, I've said it before. I've read the comics. I'm not a huge comic book fan, but I know the basics. I have studied Norse mythology, though I am far from an expert. So don't ask me the, in-depth stuff, but I have the basic knowledge of Norse mythology, enough to know how much of this movie is not based on Norse mythology. But when I saw it, I wasn't overly excited. Now, I remember the trailer because I watched the trailer again a couple days ago when I watched the movie, because I do that. I bought the movie on a platform that actually has the trailer available, so I watched the trailer before I watched the movie. But I didn't go in with the highest expectations, and part of it was because Thor himself was never one of my favorite superheroes. I don't know exactly why. I think part of it is just that when I was a kid, I always associated Thor with the little girl in Adventures in Babysitting. And I was just like,
that's right.
I I was just like, I don't care about this guy with the long curly hair and wings on his hat, and like seemed silly. And as I've said many times, Captain America is my favorite Marvel superhero. And by the time this movie came out, I already knew that they were making a Captain America movie. So I was far more excited to see Captain America. And I went to Thor just kind of like, okay, well, it's a Marvel movie. It's going to go into Captain America. I guess I got to see it. And then by the time I left, it became my favorite movie to date. Today, in hindsight, the only movie in phase one, not including the Avengers, the only movie in phase one that I like more is Captain America. And again, it's because it's Captain America, but I loved the first Thor movie. Easily my favorite of the four Thor movies. And part of this is, I know we don't want to talk about future movies too much in this show, but we all know, if we've seen Thor Ragnarok and that other one that shall not be named, Thor became a comedy. And,
Right.
and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Chris Hemsworth loves comedy. He loves doing comedy. And because he's good at it, the directors at the time or the producers said, yeah, we'll give him some comedy. So Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder became comedy movies that happened to feature Thor, a superhero. But this movie took Thor seriously as a comic book, still light enough, has lots of humor sprinkled in, but it's a superhero movie first and foremost. The Dark World got a little too dark. There was still some humor. It was still a superhero movie, but it was a lot darker and took itself maybe too seriously. But Thor Ragnarok didn't take any of it seriously. So this is easily my favorite by like a mile.
I thought Thor 1 was great. I will say that Thor the Dark World, out of all the Thor movies, was actually my least favorite. I know everybody just bags on Love and Thunder. I didn't think it was as bad as all that, but we won't go there. I loved Thor Ragnarok. I think the problem with Thor Ragnarok now is that we've had like Thor Love and Thunder in terms of like the real slapsticky, over the top like comedy. And I think that makes Thor Ragnarok, at first it stood out because it was like, wow, that was such a twist, and it was funny, and it was good, and it was engaging. And I think a little bit of the Guardians of the Galaxy vibe,
Yeah.
bled into that. It leaned too hard. It worked at the time, but now, that's why I think why people look back and be like, oh, Thor Ragnarok wasn't as good as at the time. Thor Ragnarok came out and it was like everybody loved it. Now it's like everybody thought it, it's like, wow, that really kind of pivoted. But at the time, again, where we're trying to do these podcasts, like being in that mindset at the time and not look ahead, like you said, is I think that it was I think Thor 1 was a, we're talking about, we had 2 Iron Man movies, Hulk, which sort of kind of didn't count in the MCU, at least in terms of, the story. But we had, Captain America was coming out the same year later on. So we needed this connector movie, but he also needed to be a standalone because he's Thor's a pivotal character. So I thought it was a good movie. I thought it wasn't as over the top as it potentially could have been. I think it did a good job of, again, opening up another world other than Earth, but still maintaining, a relatable character who goes through, it's kind of a classic, becoming self-aware, humbling story with Thor, but it was extremely relatable.
Yeah, I think this story, I think the thing that comes to mind when you compare this kind of cosmic story to other cosmic stories such as Guardians and even Thor Ragnarok is that this one is more, I'm not sure if this is the right word, but I want to say tasteful. And I don't mean tasteful like, everything else is raunchy. I just mean this movie is like as outlandish as some of the stuff is, like Asgard. It still takes itself seriously. It's kind of grounded.
Right.
Whereas Guardians of the Galaxy is a little bit like if you've ever read a Lobo comic, and they put the weirdest looking alien type creatures in there just for the sake of having weird creatures in there. Even Star Wars never went that hard into making goofy looking aliens in the background because they could. They made a bunch of different races. But if you've ever read a Loki comic or a Guardians of the Galaxy comic, I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy has Howard the Duck in it, and it's a duck. Okay, and I'm not bagging on
Yeah, don't
Howard.
bag on
He's a
Howard.
character that's well known now, but still, when you think about it, it's ridiculous. It's a duck who knows quack foo. All right, enough
Right.
said. Or should I say it like Stan Lee? Enough said. This is a movie that has aliens in it, but they look like humans. They act like humans. They're essentially humans, but they're from Asgard, so they have this technology that to us looks like magic, which is something that we, it's a real thing that we
Right.
we know is that if you look at technology that's far enough and far advanced enough to a primitive person, it looks like
Yeah.
magic.
Does this feel more grounded because it's based around the Norse mythology, and that's all humans could tell each other was all that they knew back in, what is this, 1000 AD, when the Vikings were telling these stories, and they didn't have the concept of sci-fi space travel. So even though it's a cosmic movie now, I think that's maybe why it feels more grounded, more connected. And even in the Asgardians' perspective in this movie, they only talk about the 9 realms. They don't talk about jump points and all the other stuff we get into in the future Guardians of the Galaxy movies, which really unveiled the whole cosmic scope of the MCU. So
No, I agree, and that's part of what I like about it. And I could talk for hours about the differences between Thor in this movie versus Thor in Norse mythology. They changed everything about him. I think it's weird to be able to say this, that if you've played the game God of War Ragnarok, that is far more realistic to the far more faithful, I should say, to the original Norse mythology. It's still not a one for one translation. There's still some differences, but they got a lot closer. And I never thought I would say that, but boy, Stanley and Steve Ditka did not know a thing about Norse mythology. They got a couple of names. They knew that Thor was a hero, and they said, let's make him blonde with long flowing hair, and he's going to be the defender of the earth. And, that's about all he knew about Thor, was that he was the protector of the earth. That they got that right.
Let's get into the Kenneth Branagh thing. Kenneth Branagh, I thought, is an interesting choice, but I think appropriate after you look at it with the kind of style that he brings because of his background with Shakespeare, all the stage he's done. I mean, the guy is like the Shakespearean film director who brings it all in there. Do you feel like Asgard, when we finally get there, we have that epic flyover where it comes in underneath and then it kind of pans over the top and we get that awesome soundtrack? Do you feel like Asgard and the way it was set up and kind of the dialogue they did, that Asgard was almost like a stage play with a big budget, with the big dramatic pauses, the big camera angles, and kind of the scope and how they present it when he's telling the story of Asgard, when Odin's narrating it. How do you feel about Kenneth Branagh? I mean, what did he do? Henry V. He's done Hamlet. He's
Gilderoy Lockhart.
He was in Gilderoy Lockhart. But he still plays it. He's still got the vibe.
Yeah. He plays it very
Right.
Shakespearean.
So, but how did you feel about visually, especially at the beginning of the movie when we get introduced to Asgard? With Kenneth Branagh's style that he brought to that. I'm of the mind that I don't think really another director would have done it like he did, because of his knowledge of that genre. I mean, I think that Shakespearean thing really played a big part into how it was presented, and it was epic but not overdone. Again, that's my opinion. I don't know who wants to weigh in first on that.
I don't mind saying, because I was going to say this anyway, this is easily my favorite look at Asgard of all of the movies. I mean, Asgard appeared in 3 of them. And I remember when they were talking about the making of The Dark World, and the director said that he wanted to make Asgard look lived in. And I didn't like that, because I liked how Asgard was this huge celestial place in the first one. I didn't want it to look lived in. And of course, in Ragnarok, it looks more like it's decaying, but it's supposed to be. It's Ragnarok. It's the end of the world for Asgard. So at least that made sense from a story point of view. But this was my favorite look because this is how Asgard is supposed to be in full glory. And I agree with you. I think Kenneth Branagh knows how to make things epic, and he was a great director for this because of things like that. The opening shot after the in media res opening, which I do want to say I thought that was unnecessary, but that's nitpicky. But the shot of going through the cosmos and then seeing it turn into that what was basically the bottom of Asgard, and then it flips over to the other side, and you see like the clouds give way, and you see this golden city. That was like, as you said, epic. It wasn't over the top, but it was still ethereal and beautiful, and it was exactly what I thought Asgard should look like. In a sense, to the Norse people in the past, this would have been the almost the equivalent of heaven, except it's not Valhalla, which was heaven.
Yeah, I was going to say, from a human point of view, we're supposed to be looking at a godly realm. And I think they did a good job of capturing that. And at the same time, showing that the inhabitants of this realm, had human like feelings and emotions and things going on. So yes, from a human point of view, is fantastical and epic and heavenly, and at the same time a bit of reality there that lived in, that comes later, a little more heavy, but it's still a realm of individuals with individual issues.
Yeah, I you know what, and that's an excellent point, and they bring it up in the movie a couple of times where Loki makes that comment. He's like, the humans think as gods, should we test that? Which I think he brings up in Avengers, actually. But even in Thor, that's kind of a subtle thing, but they don't. Again, I think Kenneth Branagh's style, not overdoing it, is like Heather, like you said, these are people too with problems.
Right.
People have daddy issues.
Human, they're human. No, well, not quite human, but yes, they have human characteristics. They have human problems and conflicts and emotions and things that we can recognize about them.
I didn't know anything about Kenneth Branagh and his directorial style at the time. I do now. I love this version of Asgard. Josh, I know you mentioned God of War Ragnarok, and they go and visit Asgard in that video game. I know what they were going for in that game. Did not like that presentation of the city. If anybody's familiar with it, and maybe I'll catch some flack for that. I like this heavenly looking style. I like that the main palace looks like a pipe organ when it flies over, almost in a cathedral type of sense. And to your guys' point about the later movies, I didn't really think about how less godlike Asgard looked compared to this movie. But now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, it's supposed to be clean. It's supposed to be pristine and perfect in this film to show contrast to Earth. And aside from Kenneth Branagh's directorial style, aesthetically, I find this whole movie very appealing. I find the Rainbow Bridge very appealing. I like how the Bifrost is explained. And in contrast to you, Josh, I actually like the exposition at the beginning of the movie. I know it doesn't really have an origin point. Odin just starts talking about Asgard and the 9 realms. But if you didn't know anything about that, you'd be kind of lost going into this.
Oh no, that part's fine. I'm talking about the part with Jane doing the storm chasing. That's the in media res, and it really didn't have a purpose. It would have been just as easy to put that in the chronological happen.
Yeah, I had almost forgotten about it.
And it wouldn't have changed
until they went back to it later.
In media res can be a very effective tool, as we saw in Iron Man 1, where it starts in the middle. He's in the Humvee, and then we go back 24 hours and see who Tony Stark is until we catch up to the present. And this is why he's in this situation. But here we get this little tiny scene of Jane chasing a storm and hitting a guy who we know to be Thor, but we don't know who he is. And now we got to go back and watch everything that led up to it. But there's no point.
I think they could have dropped it in, like go through all that background and then boom, she hits him, and now yeah, and that kind of be a comical moment almost to kick off the movie.
Yeah, they could have just had it where he gets banished, he goes flying up through into the Bifrost, and then they do the scene that we did get at the beginning of the movie. And then for the opening of the movie, I would have just had the Marvel logo turn into, like, you see the cosmos behind it, the Marvel logo disappears, and you start hearing the opening monologue by Anthony Hopkins. That's how I would have
All right,
done
just
it.
one,
But
what,
like I said, that's nitpicky.
just one other quick aside with the design of Asgard in there. And this didn't occur to me until I was rewatching it for this discussion. The design of that is actually based on a famous church in Iceland. And again, the church itself, it does have that same epic proportions. It's super tall, has that pipe organ look to it. But yeah, just for a curious point, if you want to look it up, it's called Hallgrímskirkja in Reykjavik, and you can definitely see that it's connected to the design that they chose, the design choice for Asgard.
I'm looking that up right now.
Yeah, I was going to do that too.
Oh.
Spell
Oh
it.
yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, that is really neat. Those of you listening can't see it, but we all have Google, so
Can we post the link?
yeah, we can post a link to it. Yeah, that is pretty neat. So let's talk about Thor's character arc and his origin story. Thor starts off, right there in the throne room. He's going to be handed the reins to Asgard. It's interrupted, but you see his arrogance. You see all his other stuff. Chris Hemsworth, I thought, did a great job as Thor, but again, the character arc, I don't want to say it's a basic, but it's a ages old type of character arc. Arrogant guy, banished Earth, obviously as a force, as kind of forced humility, not a punishment. It comes off like a punishment, or the character Thor perceives it as that. He loses Mjolnir, obviously not necessarily losing his powers. The whole thing is just kind of an object lesson in humility. What did we think about, in essence, that's Thor's character arc, or his origin story. We talked about it a little bit with Iron Man, with Tony Stark, and that type of thing. I mean, what did you think about, Thor, Chris Hemsworth, his portrayal as Thor, and that type of thing?
In some ways, this story is exactly the same as like tons of other origin stories. It's not all that dissimilar to Tony Stark's or to Doctor Strange for that matter. And some people complained about Doctor Strange having exactly the same arc as Tony Stark, except that where Tony becomes Iron Man and starts being good to people around him, Doctor Strange is still kind of a dick. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. And it's a story that works. And it's a story that plays out in real life all the time. There's real life examples of people who go through some kind of tribulation and come out on the other side being better for it. And at the time they wonder why they're being punished or why things are going bad for them and what did they do to deserve this. And by the time they get through said tribulations, they realize that they came out better for it. And we say, I mean, that's even the saying comes from that. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
I don't know what they could have done differently as far as the movie, but the setup of, how arrogant and how brash he is and what a rule breaker kind of rushed through for me.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that makes sense, but I mean, I know there was a lot more of the story to tell. So, I mean, what else are they going to do with it? They set him up very quickly to be arrogant and rude and obnoxious. I don't know if it was a little bit too cartoonish the way they did that, like to so quickly make him this, buffoon of a, not ready to be a leader of anything.
For what it's worth, there were some deleted scenes that would have added to it, but I also understood why they deleted them because it was padding. It was going to make the movie longer and not really add anything that you couldn't figure out already. But there were a few things that would have been helpful. Seeing more of, like, for example, Sif rolling her eyes when he comes in to the throne room for his coronation, and he's just bragging and look at me, and eating up everyone's adulations. and she's just like, yeah, whatever.
Well, and maybe a couple other character development shots of that, the montage of it goes from Loki and Thor as, I don't know, they look like
As
they're 10 or
children.
something to
Yeah.
like now, and he's this arrogant guy about to be, go for his coronation, but I don't know, a few more little pictures in there, I
I
think would
wouldn't
have
have minded.
made it
I
flow
wouldn't
a
have
little
minded
better.
seeing a few more scenes of them as younger, not
The
sometime
development
between
of
their
that arrogant personality. Yeah.
but they would have had to rush through it because there's only
Yeah.
so much time
Yeah.
to keep it under to
Yeah.
just because it's Kenneth Branagh doesn't mean he needs to make it an epic length.
I like the character of Thor. Coming back to what Josh said, some of our first exposures to Thor was Adventures in Babysitting. I've seen that movie. I love that movie. I think it's so funny, even now. And it's ironic that Vincent D'Onofrio plays the mechanic in that movie, and now he's Kingpin in the MCU. The other exposure I had to Thor when I was younger was, ironically, with the Hulk show. Dad, I think you showed us the Hulk and Thor. I don't know if it was a movie or an episode, and I liked the character. I found it fascinating, and I thought Chris Hemsworth did a really good job portraying this. I find this to be one of those rare cases where they took a bunch of unknowns, kind of propped them up next to superstar Anthony Hopkins, and called it a day. And we don't get that anymore in the MCU. Everybody's well known now.
Well, Natalie Portman was pretty well known.
Sure, but like Robert Downey Jr., to the younger crowd at least, I mean, we didn't know about his story until later, that he went through his personal tribulations as Iron Man. So I think this is also another good case of taking kind of a C-list, B-list superhero, elevating him to now A-list. I mean, you can't think of the Avengers without thinking of Thor. And I know we've talked about the Hulk kind of being the overarching character that ties everything together, or has spanned the entirety of the MCU. I'd argue that Thor and Loki do that more, especially Loki. With the show, now the whole, he's holding Yggdrasil. Spoilers if you haven't watched Loki season 2, but that's how it ends. And he holds the whole multiverse together at the end of time. I don't know. I think this movie is perfectly cast. One of those rare cases where they didn't miss a beat. I guess Natalie Portman was a superstar at this point, but she's not the main character. So
No, that's true.
Everybody says that they portray Thor as kind of this smug, arrogant guy. I kind of like the bravado scene in the beginning. I think it makes you cheer for him. And at least for me, I felt bad when he was cast aside. I know why he was, but it was like, oh man, he was about to be king. And now you feel bad for him a little bit.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
I do agree with you, Heather. I wish we had seen, because even in the later Thor movies, all that you hear about with them, Thor and Loki's escapades, it's all exposition. You never see it. I mean, the only example
Yes.
we get of them actually acting out one of their adventures or their little ploys was when he's like, we need help. And then he throws Loki.
Yeah,
that's
let's
the
do
only one we
the
see.
help scene.
Yeah. And so it would have been cool to see younger Thor and younger Loki.
There is another scene that was deleted that I actually watched from the first movie where they're talking before the coronation. Someone gives Thor his helmet and Loki starts to say something about the wings. And Thor just looks at him and says, You're the one with cow horns.
So like banter like that would have been good to
Yeah.
have in the movie. Definitely built that brotherhood between them. And then also his friend group. I mean, they're supposed to be these mighty Asgardian heroes and we know nothing about them. And it's all
we could have had
just,
more of them too. Yeah.
he has those 4 lines of exposition with the other characters. Rest in peace, Ray Stevenson.
It's still kind of weird to me that this has nothing to do with the movie specifically, but with the comics, is that they make Sif and the Warriors 3 so important. But Sif is the only character who's actually from Norse mythology. The Warriors 3 have nothing to do with it, and they're completely made up for the comics.
Right.
And even Sif is changed completely from her character in Norse mythology. In Norse mythology, Thor was not fit. He was kind of big and not fat or anything, but just he was big and burly, and he had red hair and a red beard. And Sif had long flowing golden hair, and now they made her a brunette, and I mean still fit, but like, I just find it weird that they would make these 3 characters and gives them so much importance, but also add Sif and not make her as important, even though she's an actual character from Norse mythology. A very important one. She was married to Thor.
I was like, yeah, she's his wife. Yeah, I don't know. But overall, I like the character of Thor. I like how he's portrayed in this. Is it the same type of arc that we've seen and continue to see? Sure, but how else do you tell an origin story to make it more relatable? I mean, I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I agree.
So continuing with characters, and obviously a big one, and we've already mentioned him, is Loki. You know, one of the notes I had down here was, in a way, he becomes kind of he's not the center character. Obviously, he's huge going forward after this, but he has his own arc that he goes through. How he finds out that he was adopted. He gets the whole backstory
Adopted,
there,
stolen. Yes.
Yeah, stolen. But he's the son of the king of the frost
Luffy.
giants.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and he's always been in Thor's shadow. He makes mention of that, and everything else. You know, Tom Hiddleston's performance was really good, and it just got better with each one.
Definitely.
You know, how do you guys see Loki in? Do you think his story arc is as important as I guess when I was thinking about it, we're watching it again. Where I'm going with this is that you know, we look at Thor like, oh, he's this like puffed up, immature guy sent to Earth, humbles himself, gets his power back, and comes back. And then you always look at, well, Loki is just the antagonist, you know, for him for the whole movie. But at the same time, I don't think we give enough thought to or see that Loki's going through stuff on his own. It's easy to put that kind of push that off to the side as seeing it more as just you know, part of Thor's story. What are you guys thinking about Loki and kind of his arc?
I have a lot to say about that, so I'll let Matthew and Heather go first.
Loki's story when I first saw this movie, since we like to point out, like, how did we feel when we first saw it? You know, he's the bad guy right from the get-go when you see his little disdainful face at the throne room scene. I think his reveal that he was a giant, in this movie, a frost giant, which is not accurate to Norse mythology. It's just giants, for those listening. I think his reveal was good for the viewers that don't know Norse mythology. I thought it was a nice way to throw that twist in there. And then it adds to the whole Odin becoming weak and Loki's the only heir to the throne, and then he takes over. Whether he seems antagonistic or not, he gets what he ultimately wants, is that recognition as a leader. I like his story in looking in hindsight, and I think it postures him really well for Avengers 1. No matter how hard he tries, he's never as good as he needs to be, and he's by nature not good, which we see in the Loki TV show. I don't even know if we call it a TV show because it's on streaming, but the Loki show, which is fantastic. By the way, one of the best MCU projects that they've released. So I like the story overall. It's simple in this film.
I really like the way they did Loki. And again, I know nothing about Norse mythology, so I don't have any, you know, predisposed thoughts on that. And I didn't know the comics. So when I'm watching this, I could see those subtle things, like you're supposed to kind of feel bad he's in Thor's shadow, or, you know, when he finds out he is, you know, he was stolen as a baby from the frost giants. I like that contradiction with, you kind of feel bad for him for just a moment, and then he does something awful, or you find out that this was all part of some, you know, grand scheme to do something awful. Every turn with him, it was like you find out it was worse. And I kind of like the way that was done, where you almost have sympathy for him, and then they drop another one. And then you almost have sympathy for how it's going, and then, oh, but wait, he was planning this even before that.
Right.
So I kind of I did like the way they built that up, whether that is true to the comic kind of story or not. I enjoyed it just as a movie going experience. To, you know, it's the root for the underdog, but then you find out he's not the underdog.
There's so much to say about Loki, and part of it, I do like the fact that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that he and Thor are brothers, because obviously they aren't in Norse mythology, they're not related at all. Loki and Odin were blood brothers, but they were not related at all. But I like the fact that he's Thor's brother in the movie, and part of it is because I like the fact that his motivation changes from the beginning to the end. He like to a person just looking at the movie on a completely basic scale would think that Loki just wanted the throne and that was all that was important to him. And that would make him, it would reduce him to just another Obadiah Stane, being petty because he's not good enough and wants to be better than Thor. But it's actually like he said it himself, and I believe him. He tells Thor that he never wanted the throne. The throne was not his goal. In fact, the reason he let the frost giants in the first place was not because it was part of his grand scheme. He was just having a bit of fun and delaying the coronation because he thought that Thor was kind of ridiculous. But he didn't really intend to take the throne. That all happened because by accident, because Odin entered the Odin sleep. What Loki wanted was to stop being in Thor's shadow, but he didn't want the throne. He just wanted to be seen as an equal.
Yeah, he wanted daddy's approval.
Yeah, and it wasn't until he got the throne that he started falling in love with that power that it gave him. So his ambition changes from the first movie to the Avengers. But even at the end of the first movie, he's not interested in the throne itself. He wanted to destroy the frost giants to prove that he could do it. He wanted to prove to Odin, look at me, I saved Asgard, not Thor, my dinky brother. It was me, Odin, or I mean, it was me, Loki, who defeated the frost giants single-handedly because that's what he wanted.
Right.
It's to me, that makes him so much better than, for example, Obadiah Stane, who was simply petty.
Yeah, I was just thinking ahead, about what you said about, it's kind of like, his lust for power began there when he ended up taking the throne. And I was thinking that, this is one of those movies, and I'm still staying in the Loki realm, is at the end when he's telling him, he's like, I did it for you, father, and that type of thing. And there was no big bad in this one. Sure, he sends the destroyer, but that's just, he's still fighting, Loki, but in essence, they're fighting, I don't know, the family dynamic. Thor's
Loki
got
wants
this.
to be, yeah.
Loki wants to matter and wants to be seen as good as his brother. Thor, meanwhile, is like, man, I've been kind of a immature, arrogant douchebag. And, so they both have kind of their arcs that end up culminating, and it's the typical story, but it still works. I know we keep saying that, is that you got Thor does learn his lesson, but Loki, doesn't, at least at this point, by the end.
He got seduced by the power once he had it, once he was sitting in that throne. So by the time, like after the end of the movie, when he lets go and he flies or he drops down into the cosmos, and we don't know if we're going to see him. By the time we reach the Avengers, his trauma and his jealousy is twisted, and his desire for equality has become a fixated obsession with sitting on a throne, because that's how he can prove his superiority.
Do you think there was any moment for the Loki character once it was revealed he was the son of the king of the frost giants? Just a moment of thought, of realization, like he could have been a prince in this other realm. Like he would have been in the same position as Thor, just in the frost giant for the frost
He would
giants.
have inherited the frost giants if Loki died. Then he would have become king of the frost giants. But I don't know that because I believe when he says he never sought the throne, he didn't care about that. He wanted to be equal.
Right, but
what he
to
saw
be
was
equal
his brother.
as a prince, if he were another prince in one of the 9 realms, like just that thought of thinking of what could have been, I wonder if that was part of that instigation of the craving for some of that power as well.
Interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I'm like trying to think back. Like I don't feel like the movie ever pushed it that way, because, and I think or leaned that way, because it kept being Loki trying to get Odin's approval all the time, no matter what. Even though he suddenly hits a identity crisis when he finds out that he's not his Odin's and Frigga's biological son. But it is interesting to think about. At the same time, though, it's not like he was like, well, I'm going to go back to Jotunheim and I'm going to go take over then and claim my right as the prince. He stayed
No,
there.
I think there was what's lost is lost, and
Right.
I think he still had the identity of having grown up in Asgard, but just kind of that background realization of what might have been. I don't know. I might have caught that in some of the way the expressions on their faces were. Just, those heavy realizations that you can have in life when you are suddenly something is revealed that could have been a game changer in your life.
Yeah, that's an interesting
the thoughts
point.
pass through.
So I wanted to move on to other kind of characters. So if we go to, we got the movie taking place in Asgard, but then we've also got the movie taking place on Earth. And I think that I've, other movies we were talking about before the show started, the Dolph Lundgren Masters of the Universe movie. And I know that it was like it starts in Eternia, but then they put it on Earth, and that was more for budgetary things, kind of like was it the Star Trek 4, when they go look for the whales and they have to go back in time, again, it's budgetary stuff. I don't think that in this case, I don't think it had anything to do with that. It was part of Thor's, again, his character arc, but wanted to kind of touch on Jane Darcy Selvig, who appears in future movies. Kind of the setting of New Mexico, this fictitious town that's just very, very small town. What did you guys think about those characters? Kind of the time on Earth, how that was portrayed in this small town. It's not like he landed in New York or some other big city. Like, how did that shape the movie? How did that shape his Thor's character arc?
I think it was a good contrast from the epic golden Asgard to the nothing of New Mexico. I think it made it a very strong contrast that he lost everything.
I thought that was really well done, like a good decision to make it New Mexico, because they chose what may be one of the least spectacular places for Thor to land. And that's not to put down New Mexico, but putting it there as opposed to LA or New York or even Chicago, big cities
Not even a
that
big
everyone
city in
knows.
New Mexico.
Yeah, it's not even a big city. It's not
Like
even Albuquerque. It's
middle of nowhere, New Mexico. Yeah.
It's not even a real city in New Mexico. It's another realm. Oh, wait.
It's like
it's not another
nothing,
realm,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's nothing there. It's a bunch of desert. It's what we think of as stereotypical New Mexico, without thinking about the fact that if you go to Albuquerque, it looks like every other big city.
I like the other characters. Again, perfectly cast characters. Stellan Skarsgård as Selvig was really funny, even if he wasn't trying to be. Natalie Portman was good as Jane Foster, and then I, for the life of me, can't remember the actress name. Kat Dennings, that's right. I think they all played their characters really well. I like the whole science aspect. Again, this movie was released around the time where filmmakers were really interested in, for some reason, desert landscapes and showing those off. Because you think about Iron Man, and even though it was supposed to be the Middle East, it was still the desert. You think about like Transformers 1, released just 4 years prior. A lot of it's in the desert, and Transformers 2 and is also in the desert. So for whatever reason, the late 2000s, early 2010s, filmmakers liked the desert. I don't disagree with making New Mexico kind of the focal point after Asgard to show contrast. I find it boring. New Mexico is boring by default if you've ever driven through it. And I'm not going to apologize for that. I've done it a couple different times now. It's boring. And I didn't like that aspect of the movie. I think once we're on Earth, I know it's essential to the arc, the backdrop and the setting. It's almost jarring. And maybe it's meant to be. I didn't like it. I find it less entertaining that he's here on Earth. I know they had to tie it into Earth somehow, some way. When you think of the term Midgard in Norse mythology, you think, I don't know, I think forest, I think greenery. And I just didn't like the desert landscape in this movie. I didn't like the setting that they chose. The characters were fine and they played their parts well. And it kind of played into the aspect of like New Mexico's known for aliens with Area 51. It's not my favorite part. And this is where I think the movie drops a little bit in quality, is after he's thrown to Earth in the most desolate place they could find.
I like the characters, but one thing that I know no one's gonna like about me is that I'm not a huge fan, in this movie at least, of Natalie Portman.
How dare you?
I mean, I don't hate her at all, but I've seen a lot of movies where she was better, and I don't think she's particularly good in this movie. And I wasn't a huge fan of her in Star Wars either.
I didn't think there was a lot of noteworthy about the character that was written for her.
Well,
So
yeah,
a
that
little bit
might be.
stereotypical, and especially, the hot guy enters the room and now she's all, gaga eyes, like she's supposed to be the brilliant scientist.
But Kat Dennings did that to a degree too, but she completely stole the show from Natalie Portman. I thought that Darcy was far more interesting in every possible way. And of course, Eric Selvig, I thought Stellan Skarsgård, I haven't seen a bad performance from him. He is amazing in everything. The only character that he's ever been that I think I like more than Eric is Luthen Rael from Andor.
He was great in Chernobyl. If you've ever seen Chernobyl, oh my gosh, sorry, tangent.
I never said that I was a professional, like every single movie ever made. I'm not a connoisseur. I watch movies I like. Yeah, I'm not a cinephile. I don't pretend to be. I watch movies that sound interesting to me, and if they don't sound interesting to me, you'll be hard pressed to get me to watch them.
So other than the Earth part and going to Earth and how that affects Thor's arc, we've got all these other characters, as well as, just kind of the Asgardian politics, which is kind of the overall. We've got Odin, the wise king, yet he has his, kind of a tragic figure. We've got Rene Russo as the queen. We talked about Warriors 3 and Sif. Heimdall. We haven't even talked about Heimdall. So let's talk a little bit about some of that, some of the other characters and the cast there.
Yeah, I don't think this movie is perfectly cast in every way. I don't know how many times I could say that. You couldn't pick a better Odin besides Anthony Hopkins. His voice, the way he speaks, the cadence of his words, very kingly. I find Odin to be an interesting character in this movie.
For this version of
Odin.
This version,
yeah. Again, not accurate to Norse mythology,
not
just the same way Zeus is not accurate in Hercules, the Disney animated film. So I like this version for this setting. I think Anthony Hopkins did a really great job, and everybody calls out that scene where Tom Hiddleston approaches Anthony Hopkins when Thor's being banished, and that was ad-lib when he barks at him without anything, and you're like, oh crap. And so I think he does it so well. I feel like Frigga, as important as she is in Norse mythology, was kind of sidelined in this movie. She's very crucial to Thor and Loki's stories in those mythological tales. And then Heimdall, another relatively unknown actor at the time, with Idris Elba. I definitely think this shot him to stardom. I like his character. I like he plays the all-seeing eye, rather neutral, and the sole protector of the Bifrost really, really well. So I think the Asgardian entourage, we'll call it, of characters portrays their characters better. They're more entertaining to watch than the human counterparts.
I agree. Well, Heimdall himself, Idris Elba, I don't know if he knew this going in, but he's just so, just his mere presence is intimidating, which makes him perfect for Heimdall. Not at all comic accurate. I mean, not at all Norse accurate, not comic. That's not Heimdall from Norse mythology, but it's Heimdall here. And Idris Elba plays him really, really well. And Jamie Alexander as Sif, again, excellent how... I like that she was able to give Sif this strength, because Sif was always, even in Norse mythology, an extremely strong female character warrior. And I do love her line when Thor is trying to get everyone to follow him to Jotunheim because he wants to fight for no good reason. And he looks at Sif and says, "Who proved to everyone that you can, that even as a female warrior, you could take on the best of them?" And she said, "I did." He's like, yes. But I knew that you could do it," or something like that. Yeah. So she does it really well. And the only thing I don't like about the Warriors 3 is that even though they're used more in this movie than in any other of the Thor movies, they're still underused considering their importance in the comics. And we'll eventually get there, but Ragnarok really did them dirty.
As far as Sif of the Warriors 3, I think they could have leaned into she's the most important of those four. And they could have made her even stronger, I think. Heimdall definitely, like, he to me is the true protector of the realm. Everybody else has got their emotions and stuff in the way. He's very legalistic as a character, and right down to, like, I didn't open them. Like, he couldn't compromise his allegiances, so he had somebody else do it. Like, he, very, very loyal and very specific. So I think I like that about the character. And yeah, Frigga, barely noticeable to me as a character in this movie. It was all about the father and the two sons, and she was just there.
I do feel like it's noteworthy to say that we get first appearances from characters that will be important later on. One, of course, is Hawkeye. Jeremy Renner.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The first look at Hawkeye in this movie briefly. And of course, we also get George Sitwell, Agent George Sitwell, who will eventually turn out to be an agent of Hydra. He appeared in several of the movies and also in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Once, I think, or maybe twice before it was revealed that he was Hydra. So I thought it was important to note that.
I really like the introduction of Hawkeye, and take a
well.
gun and you see him pause over the gun and go for the bow. Yeah, that was a nice touch.
Yeah, anyone who didn't know who he was would have thought, okay, this is just an interesting guy who uses a bow and arrow. But everyone who knew who he was, anyone who read a comic and knew who Hawkeye was, knew immediately. And I remember seeing in the theater the first time, everyone, like, I could hear half of the theater was like, oh my God, it's Hawkeye. And the other half was like, who is this?
I was probably in the other half when I first saw it. But yeah, especially now rewatching it, it's like, oh, yeah, nice.
So kind of talking about what this movie has done for the MCU at this point in time, kind of as we get near the end of the movie, you've got Loki. We've talked about it before. You finally see Thor in his humbleness, kind of, willing to sacrifice himself. And we'll get into the whole post-credit scene, because this is where we get that look at the Avengers, setting up the MCU, the Thor one, and kind of setting up all the future stuff that's going to happen. Do you feel like this sets up the Avengers as well as kind of what's coming up after Thor pretty well? I mean, kind of what are your thoughts, final thoughts, anything else you wanted to talk about?
You're talking about the post-credit scene?
Well, I'm talking about just kind of like where it is. We talk about how Loki's hanging there. He lets go, goes off. I think we all kind of felt, we know Loki wasn't going to die. He was going to go somewhere else, but we weren't. Yeah, there was no body. So just kind of like final thoughts, anything else you kind of wanted to talk about with Thor?
Well, we knew that we were going to see Loki again. And if you include the post-credit scene where we actually did see Loki again, it does set up the next movie really well. We didn't know what was going to happen, but now we knew that Eric had the Tesseract. We didn't know exactly what it meant to see Loki's reflection there, but it seemed like by means of extension, Loki now had access to the Tesseract. So I think that set it up very well.
From a non-comic book person, I think I need a little more before we went all the way to Avengers. A little more of the cosmic side and how that was influencing it. But that's, again, just me not having more of the background. And you can only do so much with so many movies. So, but the story itself, the humbling of Thor as a storyline, I think I really like that. And I didn't necessarily care for the focus on oh my gosh, how hot is this guy? That some of those comments started to wear on me throughout the movie. Whether it was the Darcy or Jane, head over heels kind of stuff, drive the crazy man to the middle of the desert, just because he's hot, or whatever. So I think some of that started to annoy me as I progressed through the movie. And I will say it was very hard rewatching it to separate out future goofy Thor as I was watching this. Because this is, if you take it just as it was a very serious, deep for a, superhero movie, but a deep, the growth of this character. But the whole time rewatching it, I'm just thinking about all the slapstick stuff that came later for Thor. So it was a little hard to keep that separate.
Yeah, that's part of why this is my favorite Thor, is because it takes it seriously, where even Ragnarok didn't. And I like Ragnarok a lot. I don't like Thor Love and Thunder very much, but both of those two movies are comedies and they don't take Thor seriously.
No, like I said, I think this movie was a pleasant surprise. That's what I said in the beginning, called it a gift, until we get to the New Mexico scenes, and then I feel like it drops in quality. Sticking with, is it better or worse than the Hulk as my baseline? I find this movie to be just below the Hulk overall. The New Mexico scenes, again, just really just take away from what was built up in that first 45 minutes, first 30 minutes of the film. I know it goes back and forth, but it was just, I don't know. Overall, I mean, I still enjoy this movie. I like it better now, even more after some of the crap we've gotten in the MCU. This Thor movie, I don't think it's my favorite one. I like Ragnarok the best. I know we've all been kind of trashing on Ragnarok because of the comedy.
I don't mean to trash on it, because I do like Ragnarok a lot, but I like this one more.
I found Ragnarok overall to be a more compelling story, despite the humor. It had a clear central villain. I do think this is the second best Thor. I think it sets up Avengers 1 really well.
One thing I do want to say is that I really like the music. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a lot of the music is good, but there's very few very notable themes. I loved the epic theme of Thor that they play when he gets his power, when he gets the hammer back, and when they play during the end credits, the beginning of the opening credits, during the shot at space where they go back to Asgard. That is like probably my favorite theme in almost all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I think that's an interesting point you bring up, and I've thought about this before. There is no iconic themes in any of the MCU, right? That there's soundtracks.
Nothing like
it's not
nothing
John
like
Williams.
Superman.
There's nothing memorable about the MCU soundtracks, which I think is a bad thing overall. I do think that Thor has a good soundtrack. Thor 1 specifically. Patrick Doyle, I think, was the composer when he did Goblet of Fire. And Goblet of Fire has a fantastic soundtrack. So I think whatever Feige was going through when he was setting up the MCU, music was not a central focus, and that frustrates me.
They could have capitalized on that, especially with all these different characters, with all of their independent themes, and then you come to a movie like Avengers, you could have hinted at all of these and really pulled it all together.
Mm-hmm.
But there are very few people that are good at that. Like John Williams is the master at it, because he's always been a strong proponent of what's called leitmotif, which means a theme specifically for a character. And you see it in any individual Star Wars movie where a character or even a concept has a theme. So Luke Skywalker had his theme. The Force had a theme. Obi-Wan had a theme. Eventually Yoda had his own theme. And they definitely could have done it, but there are very few people like John Williams. And a lot of, even the newer composers, some of them are really good, but very few people use leitmotif anymore. So I think that that's everything that we need to talk about unless anyone else has any last minute things. No? All right. So that's it for Thor. I really enjoyed this movie a lot. But next week, we're going to, Avengers aside, my favorite movie, Captain America, The First Avenger, is my favorite movie of Phase 1. We'll be doing that next week. If you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe. It helps us out a lot. I know we say that all the time, but it really does. And thank you again for listening. As always, make tomorrow better than yesterday.